In the run-up to the 1997 general election, there was a widespread understanding that Labour were on the cusp of power. The incumbent Tory government was being outfoxed in the media by a young, popular Tony Blair, and many knew that the near 20-year-long span of Conservative rule was soon to come to an end. This prediction was proven correct, and on voting night, 133 Conservatives were unseated. Among them was the incumbent Defence Secretary Michael Portillo, a very senior member of the Tory party and someone who was tipped to succeed John Major.
Labour Party, 20,500. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
And the shock of this moment in the 97 election made it one of the most memorable moments in recent political history. So much so that the term Portillo moment is now used to refer to any senior figure who unexpectedly loses their seat on election night. And, well, on election night, we're expecting a number of Portillo moments, specifically from high-ranking Tories. While this is definitely going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on tonight, it certainly isn't the only thing worth paying attention to. This election affects all of the major parties, and there's a real possibility of a complete realignment in British politics, with the Lib Dems potentially moving up to overtake the Tories and become the main party of opposition. So in this video, we're going to take a look at exactly what you should be paying attention to on election night, with each of the political parties, before moving on and discussing which Tory beasts might be losing their seats. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. Now, all we really have to go on right now in order to predict what's going to happen tonight are MRP polls. And while they all differ slightly in their predictions, on the whole, they're in agreement that it's going to be a particularly bad night for the Tories and SNP, and a good night for Labour and the Lib Dems. On the Labour front, the predictions range from the low 400s all the way up to the 500s mark. Now, to be fair, any number within this range would be impressive, and could well represent the highest number of seats ever won by the Labour Party. Currently, the record stands at 418 seats, achieved by Tony Blair in 1997, a record which could be beaten. The Conservatives may also set a record tonight, the lowest seat share ever achieved by their party. As things stand, this record was set in 1906, when the Conservatives achieved only 156 seats. And unfortunately for them, basically all MRP polls predict that they'll achieve fewer seats than this tonight. Anywhere between the 130 and 150 mark would be seen as a pretty bad night for them, but better than expected and not the end of the world. A seat share between 100 and 130 is essentially what most people are expecting right now, but will be seen as a pretty terrible performance from Sunak. Anything below 100, though, is Armageddon. Double digits in terms of seats will be deeply humiliating and exacerbate partisan infighting within the party, and questions would also start to be asked about whether the party could ever even recover. What makes this even worse is the fact that the Lib Dems are predicted to win between 40 and 80-ish seats, meaning that there is a world in which they could overtake the Tories. This would constitute a huge realignment in British politics, and would move the Tories even closer to extinction. For Reform, though, this could be the start of their integration into the British political system. Polls are predicting that they're on track for about 20% of the vote. However, because of the first-past-the-post system, the best they can hope for in terms of seat count is about 7. However, this will give them a pretty decent bridgehead to work from in the next election. So that's roughly how each party is expected to do, and the numbers to keep an eye on. But what about individuals? Which Tories are expected to actually lose their seats? The biggest potential Portillo moment on polling night is, without a doubt, Rishi Sunak. If he were to lose his seat, he would be the first sitting Prime Minister to do so in British history, an accolade he's surely going to want to avoid. Right now, Sunak is sitting on a massive 27,210 vote majority, something that should be unassailable. It's worth noting, though, that an MRP poll from Electoral Calculus, the most recent of the MRP polls, predicts that Sunak will lose his seat. Similarly, another MRP poll from Savanta on the 19th of June also predicted that Sunak would lose his seat. However, Sunak is likely going to be reassured by the fact that all other recent MRP polls have predicted that he will retain his seat. Regardless, many of these MRPs predict a damaging election for Sunak, but not quite so bad that he's pushed down into third place. Ultimately then, whether Sunak is the first Prime Minister in history to suffer the indignity of losing his seat will all be determined by which end of the MRP poll spectrum ends up being correct. With that in mind, let's move on and discuss another key figure in the current Tory government, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. Again, it's worth saying that no Chancellor in British history has ever lost their seat in a general election, and like Sunak, Hunt won't want to be the first. Unlike Sunak though, his constituency is far from safe, with his majority in 2019 standing at only 8,817 votes. Considering that Labour and the Lib Dems have overturned much larger majorities in by-elections in the last couple of years, and with national Tory polling sitting so low, this constituency shouldn't be too difficult to overturn. And unfortunately for Hunt, current MRP polling also backs this up. In fact, the only MRP poll so far that says Hunt will retain his seat is the Ipsos poll from the 18th of June. And to be fair, even in this poll, the prediction is that Hunt will only win his seat by 1 point, with him on 34% and the Lib Dems on 33%. Every other MRP poll predicts a loss to the Lib Dems. As things stand then, it looks likely that Hunt will probably lose his seat, unless either the national polling changes or there's a marked step up in his local campaign. It's not just these two either. There's also Home Secretary James Cleverly. Elected to the constituency of Braintree in 2015, Cleverly held a pretty significant majorities there ever since. In 2019, for instance, he achieved a near 25,000 vote majority. Again, as we saw with Sunak, it's not impossible that this could be overturned tonight though. Of the MRP polls, 3 predict that Cleverly will lose his seat to Labour, Savanta Salvation and We Think, and the other 9 all think that Cleverly will retain his seat, albeit with a reduced majority. So all in all, it looks as though not only are the Tories expected to lose a huge number of seats across the country, but they're also potentially set to lose some of their biggest political figures too. Ultimately, all of this will become clear on Thursday evening when the election results begin to come in. And if you want to be guided through those results, see our live reaction to the exit poll, and interact with our team live, then you can join us for our official election night live stream. If you want access to that stream, you'll need to pick up a copy of Too Long, our 60-page, high-quality magazine full of TLDR's very best journalism. This issue is focused on the UK election, diving deep into the campaign, the results, and how the winners plan to fix Britain. It's more than just Britain, though, with stories including the European parliamentary elections, the countries likely to join the EU next, the latest from Gaza, the rise of Milei, and, of course, the US election. Now, we've decided to make the magazine for 2 reasons. Firstly, it allows our journalists to write in more detail, diving deeper and ignoring algorithmic restrictions to produce the best work we can. And secondly, it's a good way for you to support TLDR and will help us to produce free YouTube videos as long as we can. If you're interested, then you can pick up a copy from our website, where we're selling 2 editions of the magazine. Firstly, there's the standard edition, and then there's the premium edition, which gets your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine, access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, and exclusive access to our election night live stream, where we'll be reacting to the exit poll with you as it happens. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be making an issue of Too Long every 4 months. So if you want to ensure that you never miss an issue, then you can subscribe, which gets you a 25% discount. If you have more questions, there's a full Q&A linked in the description, where you'll also find a link to our store. And while you're there, make sure you use the code ELECTIONWEEK to get an additional £2 off any purchase. Thanks so much for hearing me out, and if you are interested, please do pick up a copy, as it's a great way to support our journalism and help us to continue making free YouTube videos as long as we can.